You know that feeling when someone you trust completely betrays you? When the person who's supposed to have your back stabs you right through the heart? Well, let me tell you about my sister and how she taught me that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. My name is Carmen. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how I lost everything and then took it all back. I was married to my college sweetheart for 8 years before we got divorced. No kids. We tried for years, but it just wasn't in the cards for us. The divorce was amicable enough, but it left me starting over at 30. That's when I moved back to my hometown, into the house where I grew up, to take care of our aging parents. Mom had early onset dementia, and Dad was struggling with his own health issues. My sister Clarissa, who's 3 years younger than me, lived across the country in California, building her empire, as she liked to call it. She was always the ambitious one, the golden child who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. While I was changing diapers and managing medications, she was sending occasional flowers and making promises to visit that never materialized. For 3 years, I sacrificed everything. I quit my marketing job that I loved, used up my divorce, settlement money to cover medical expenses, and watched my own life slowly disappear as I became a full-time caregiver. I didn't date, barely saw friends, and lived like a nun in my childhood bedroom while my parents deteriorated in front of my eyes. The house was worth about $400,000, a beautiful 2-story colonial in a nice neighborhood that Dad had bought back in the 80s. It was our family's pride and joy, filled with memories, and the only real asset our parents had besides their modest savings. When Dad passed away suddenly from a heart attack, I was devastated. Mom's condition worsened rapidly without him, and within 6 months, she was gone too. I was alone, broke, and emotionally drained, but at least I had the house. According to their will, Clarissa and I were supposed to inherit everything equally, but I assumed we'd figure out some arrangement where I could buy out her half or something. After all, I'd been the one taking care of them. That's when Clarissa showed up for the funeral, looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover with her designer black dress and perfectly styled hair. She hugged me tight and whispered, "We're going to get through this together, sis. I'm here for you now." Those words should have been a warning. 2 weeks after the funeral, Clarissa suggested we grab coffee to talk about the future. I was still in my grief fog, wearing sweatpants and one of Dad's old sweaters, while she looked like she was heading to a business meeting. "Carmen, honey," she said, stirring her oat milk latte. "I've been thinking about the house situation." "Yeah?" I said, hoping she'd suggest letting me stay and work out some payment plan. "Well, you know the market is absolutely crazy right now. Properties are selling for way above asking price. I think we should sell while we can get top dollar." My stomach dropped. "Sell? But Clarissa, this is our family home. I've been living here, taking care of everything." "I know, and you've done such an amazing job," she interrupted, reaching across to pat my hand. "But think about it practically. You can't afford to maintain this place on your own, and I can't afford to buy you out. If we sell now, we could each walk away with $200,000 or more. That's enough for you to get a fresh start somewhere new, maybe move to a city with better job opportunities." The way she said it made it sound so reasonable, so logical. But the thought of losing the only stability I had left made me feel sick. "I don't know, Clarissa. This place means everything to me. It's all I have left of them." She leaned forward, her voice gentle but persistent. "Carmen, you're 34. You can't live in the past forever. Mom and Dad wouldn't want you to be trapped here, barely surviving. They'd want you to build a new life." Over the next few days, she kept bringing it up. She'd call with real estate market reports, send me articles about investment opportunities, and talk about how we could use our inheritance money to invest together in something that would set us both up for life. "I have this incredible opportunity through my business connections," she told me during one of our daily phone calls. "There's this real estate development project in Phoenix that's looking for private investors. My friend Jessica is already in for $500,000, and she's projected to triple her investment within 2 years. Triple? I asked, feeling a spark of hope for the first time in months. At least, Carmen, we could take our inheritance money and turn it into generational wealth. Imagine having enough money to never worry about anything again. We could travel, you could go back to school, start that consulting business you always talked about. The idea was intoxicating. After years of struggling financially, the thought of real security was appealing. Plus, Clarissa seemed so confident, so knowledgeable about these things. She'd always been the successful one, the one who made smart decisions while I played it safe. But what if something goes wrong? I asked. Carmen, I wouldn't suggest this if I wasn't absolutely certain. I've done my research. Jessica has shown me all the projections, the permits, everything. This is as close to a sure thing as you can get in investing. She wore me down gradually, addressing every concern with what sounded like expert knowledge. When I worried about not having a place to live, she suggested I could rent a small apartment with part of my share and invest the rest. When I worried about the risk, she reminded me that keeping money in savings was actually losing money due to inflation. Look, she finally said after 2 weeks of these conversations, if you're not comfortable with the Phoenix deal, we don't have to do it. But we should still sell the house. The market won't stay this hot forever, and we'll kick ourselves if we miss this opportunity. That's when she hit me with the emotional manipulation that finally broke my resistance. Carmen, I feel terrible that I wasn't here to help with Mom and Dad. I know you sacrificed so much, and I want to make it up to you. Let me help you build something better. We're sisters. We should be supporting each other, not holding each other back. Against every instinct I had, I agreed to sell the house. The process moved quickly, too quickly in retrospect. Clarissa handled most of the details through a real estate agent she knew, and we got an offer for $420,000 within a week of listing. After agent fees and closing costs, we each walked away with about $190,000. I remember sitting in the attorney's office, signing the papers, feeling like I was signing away my entire history. The house keys felt impossibly heavy in my hand as I handed them over to the new owners, a young couple with 2 kids who were excited about the big backyard and the good school district. You're doing the right thing, Clarissa whispered as we walked out together. This is going to change everything for both of us. I moved into a furnished studio apartment across town, paying $1,200 a month for a space that was smaller than my childhood bedroom. It was depressing and lonely, but Clarissa assured me it was temporary. Just until the Phoenix investment pays off, she said. Then you can buy whatever house you want. For the next month, she kept me updated on the investment process. There were documents to review, meetings with developers, site visits that she handled on my behalf since I was in a different state. She sent me photos of the construction site, progress reports, and projected timelines. Everything is moving perfectly, she'd tell me during our weekly calls. Jessica says the first phase is already ahead of schedule. I was feeling optimistic for the first time in years. Maybe Clarissa was right. Maybe this was exactly what I needed to restart my life. Then the calls started becoming less frequent. When I tried to reach her, she'd be in meetings or traveling for work. Her updates became vague and brief, just some minor permitting delays, she'd say. Totally normal for projects this size. But something felt wrong. Call it intuition, call it paranoia, but I started having trouble sleeping. I'd lie awake in my tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering why I couldn't shake this feeling of dread. 3 months after we'd invested the money, I finally demanded specific details about the project. I wanted to see financial statements, talk to other investors, visit the site myself. That's when Clarissa's tone changed completely. Carmen, you need to relax. I'm handling everything. Do you not trust me? It's not about trust, I said, though it was becoming exactly about trust. I just want to understand what's happening with my money. Your money? She snapped. This was a joint investment, remember? We're partners in this. The conversation devolved into an argument where she accused me of being controlling and paranoid, while I accused her of being secretive and evasive. We hung up on each other and I didn't hear from her for 2 weeks. When she finally called back, her voice was small and shaky. "Carmen, I need to tell you something." My blood turned to ice. "What?" "The Phoenix project." There were some complications. Some unexpected issues with the environmental impact study. The whole thing fell through. I couldn't breathe. "What do you mean it fell through?" "The investment is gone. I'm so sorry, Carmen. I'm so sorry." Gone. $190,000. My entire inheritance, my parents' life's work, my future security. Gone. "But there has to be something we can do," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Insurance, legal action, something." "I've already talked to lawyers. The contracts were ironclad. When you invest in development projects, you assume the risk. There's no recourse." I hung up the phone and threw up. Actually threw up right there in my tiny kitchen, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened to me. But the worst part wasn't the money. The worst part was that 3 days later, I saw Clarissa's Instagram post announcing her new house purchase. A gorgeous Spanish-style villa with a pool, a 3-car garage, and a price tag that definitely exceeded $200,000. The caption read, "New chapter, new home. So grateful for unexpected blessings. Blessed Santo new beginnings." I called her immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed. "Clarissa, I just saw your post. How did you buy a house if you lost your investment? Money too?" The pause was too long, way too long. "I had other investments, Carmen, other income streams. I didn't put all my eggs in one basket like—" She stopped herself, but the damage was done. "Like I did?" I finished for her. "Like the naive little sister who trusted you with everything she had. Carmen, it's not like that." "Where's my money, Clarissa? I told you the investment fell through. Where is my money?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold and defensive. "The money is gone, Carmen. I'm sorry, but that's the reality of investing. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. I can't help it if you can't handle the risk." That's when I knew. There was no Phoenix investment. There probably never had been. My sister had stolen my inheritance, and she was living in a beautiful new house while I ate ramen noodles in a studio apartment. I was too shocked to even cry, too devastated to even get angry. I just hung up the phone and sat in silence for hours, trying to process the depth of her betrayal. She'd played me perfectly, used my grief, my trust, my desperation for a better future to manipulate me into giving her everything. While I was mourning our parents and struggling to survive, she was planning how to rob me blind. Over the next few weeks, I tried to investigate on my own. I searched for any record of the Phoenix development project, tried to contact the mysterious Jessica, who was supposedly also an investor, even hired a private investigator with money I couldn't afford to spend. Nothing. No project, no Jessica, no investment company. Just a trail of fake documents and fabricated stories that my sister had used to steal from me. When I confronted her with my findings, she didn't even bother to deny it anymore. "Carmen, you were going to waste that money anyway," she said with stunning casualness. "At least this way, it stayed in the family. And honestly, I did most of the work dealing with Mom and Dad's estate. You just happened to be physically present." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I gave up 3 years of my life taking care of them. And I gave up my peace of mind worrying about them from across the country. We all make sacrifices, Carmen. That conversation was the last time we spoke for 8 months. I was completely alone, completely broke, and completely broken. I'd wake up every morning in that depressing apartment, look at my dwindling bank account, and wonder how I'd been so stupid. The worst part was that everyone else in our family thought Clarissa was wonderful. She'd managed to spin the story so that she was the successful sister who was helping Carmen get back on her feet, while I was the irresponsible one who'd made some bad investment choices. I couldn't even correct the narrative without admitting how thoroughly she'd conned me, which was too humiliating to bear. So I suffered in silence, working a part-time retail job that barely covered my expenses, living paycheck to paycheck in a tiny apartment, while my sister posted pictures of her perfect life in her perfect house with her perfect everything. But here's what Clarissa didn't know about me. I might have been naive, but I wasn't weak. And I might have been trusting, but I was also patient, very, very patient. The first few months after discovering the truth were the darkest of my life. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat, replaying every conversation, every moment where I should have seen through her lies. The guilt was almost worse than the financial devastation. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted someone so completely when all the warning signs were there? I started keeping a journal, writing down everything I could remember about our conversations, the timeline of events, the excuses she'd made. At first, it was just a way to process my emotions, but gradually it became something else, a case study in manipulation that I needed to understand completely. Clarissa was a master manipulator, I realized. She'd used every psychological trick in the book. She'd exploited my grief, my isolation, my desperate need for family connection after losing our parents. She'd positioned herself as the successful sister who was graciously helping me, making me feel like I owed her gratitude for even considering me as an investment partner. The fake urgency, the market pressure, the way she'd made me feel like I was holding us both back if I didn't act quickly. It was all calculated. She'd probably been planning this from the moment Dad died, maybe even before. What really ate at me was remembering how excited I'd been about our partnership. For the first time since my divorce, I'd felt like I had a future to look forward to. I'd actually started making plans. Maybe I'd go back to school, maybe I'd travel, maybe I'd finally have the financial security to take some risks and build something meaningful. Instead, I was 35 years old, working retail for $12 an hour and living in a studio apartment that smelled like the Indian restaurant downstairs. The humiliation was almost unbearable. When former colleagues would ask how I was doing, I'd have to lie and say I was taking some time to figure things out. When I ran into old friends at the grocery store, I'd pretend I was living in the apartment temporarily while I renovated a house I'd bought. The lies became exhausting, but not as exhausting as the truth would have been. 3 months into my retail job, I got promoted to assistant manager. It wasn't much, just $2 more an hour and the responsibility of dealing with difficult customers. But it was something. My manager, Patricia, was a tough woman in her 50s who'd been working retail her whole life. She saw something in me that I'd forgotten existed. "You're too smart for this place," she told me one day while we were closing up. "You've got education, you've got experience. What are you doing here?" I almost told her everything right then. The words were right there, ready to spill out. How I'd lost everything, how my own sister had stolen my future, how I was basically starting over from scratch in my mid-30s. But something held me back. "Just figuring things out," I said instead. Patricia nodded like she understood. "Well, while you're figuring, you might as well learn everything you can. Retail teaches you about people, how they think, what they want, how they make decisions. That's valuable knowledge." She was right. Working with customers every day, I started to understand human psychology in a way I never had before. I learned to read people's motivations, to spot when someone was lying or trying to manipulate a situation. I learned how to build rapport, how to make people feel heard and understood, how to guide them toward decisions that felt like their own idea. Most importantly, I learned how to be patient, how to smile and nod and wait for the right moment to get what I needed. 6 months into my new life, I was walking past a coffee shop when I overheard a conversation that changed everything. "Yeah, She totally screwed over her sister, took her whole inheritance, and bought that house on Maple Street. The sister doesn't even know. She thinks it was some failed investment. He froze. The woman speaking was about my age, blonde, wearing expensive workout clothes. She was talking to another woman, both of them laughing like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. "That's awful," the second woman said, but she was smiling. "How do you know all this?" "My realtor is friends with her realtor. Apparently the sister was so naive, she just handed over the money without even asking questions. Can you imagine being that stupid?" My face burned with shame and rage. Not only had Clarissa stolen from me, but she was telling people about it, making me into a cautionary tale, a joke to share over expensive lattes. But as I stood there, listening to these strangers mock my pain, something shifted inside me. The shame was still there, but underneath it was something harder, colder, determination. I followed the blonde woman to her car and wrote down her license plate number. It took me 3 days of casual investigation to figure out who she was and how she knew Clarissa. Turns out she was part of a book club that Clarissa had joined since moving to town. The same book club where my sister was apparently sharing intimate details about our family situation for entertainment. That's when I realized Clarissa had a weakness I could exploit. Her need to be seen as successful and superior. She couldn't just steal from me and enjoy the proceeds quietly. She had to brag about it, had to make sure everyone knew how clever she was and how stupid I was. Pride. That was going to be her downfall. I started researching her new life systematically. I found her social media accounts, her book club, her gym, her favorite restaurants. I learned her routine, her habits, her friends. I discovered she was dating someone new, a successful lawyer named Harrison who had no idea about her past. Most importantly, I learned that she was living beyond her means. The house was expensive, but so was everything else. The car, the clothes, the lifestyle. She was spending money faster than she could make it, even with my stolen inheritance. That's when the plan started forming. I began reaching out to her gradually, carefully. First, I sent a birthday card with a generic message, then a text around the holidays. Nothing confrontational, nothing that would put her on guard. Just small gestures that said I was trying to move on, trying to forgive and forget. She was suspicious at first, but I was patient. I let months pass between contacts, made sure every interaction was brief and non-threatening. I played the role of the defeated sister who was slowly coming to terms with what had happened. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I texted her after 8 months of silence. "I know we both made mistakes. Maybe we can talk sometime." Her response came 3 days later. "I'd like that. I've missed you, liar." But I replied, "I've missed you too." We started talking regularly again, but I was careful to keep the conversation surface level. I told her about my job, my apartment, my quiet life. I made myself sound small and contained, like someone who'd learned her lesson and accepted her limitations. She, meanwhile, couldn't help but brag about her success. The new house, the new boyfriend, the business opportunities she was pursuing. Every conversation was a performance designed to show me how well she was doing with my money. I let her perform. I asked interested questions, made impressed comments, played the role of the supportive sister who was happy for her success, even though I was still struggling. What she didn't know was that I was documenting everything. Every conversation, every detail about her finances, every admission about how she'd acquired her wealth. I was building a case, piece by piece, that would eventually destroy her. The breakthrough came when she mentioned having some financial stress. "Harrison and I are talking about getting engaged," she said during one of our phone calls. "But weddings are so expensive, and the house payments are higher than I expected. I might need to look into some investment opportunities to generate more income. That's when I knew she was ready for the next phase of my plan. Actually, I said, keeping my voice casual, I've been learning a lot about investments lately. There might be some opportunities we could explore together. The silence on the other end was telling. She was interested but cautious. What kind of opportunities? She asked. Well, I've been working with this financial advisor who specializes in real estate flipping. Nothing as big as what we tried before, but smaller, safer projects that can generate steady returns. I could practically hear her brain working, calculating whether she could trust me, whether this was some kind of trap. Carmen, I don't know if that's a good idea. After what happened before, I know, I said quickly. I know you feel bad about the Phoenix thing, but that wasn't your fault. You were just trying to help both of us succeed. I've learned so much since then about due diligence and risk management. This would be different. The hook was set. Over the next few weeks, I fed her carefully crafted information about my fictional financial advisor and his successful track record. I sent her fake testimonials, fabricated profit reports, and detailed investment strategies that sounded impressive, but were actually copied from legitimate financial websites. The beauty of it was that she wanted to believe me. She needed more money, and she was arrogant enough to think she could outsmart me again. In her mind, I was still the naive little sister who'd fallen for her scam before. What she didn't realize was that I'd learned from a master, her. 2 months into baiting, Clarissa with investment talk, she finally took the bait completely. You know what, Carmen? She said during one of our weekly calls. Maybe we should meet in person to discuss this investment thing. I could drive down this weekend. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. That sounds great. I'd love to see you. When she arrived at my tiny apartment, I almost felt sorry for her. She looked stressed. Designer clothes couldn't hide the tension lines around her eyes or the way she kept checking her phone. The financial pressure was getting to her. God, Carmen, this place is... She started, then caught herself. It's cozy. It's temporary, I said with a self-deprecating smile. But it's taught me to live within my means. Come on, let me make us some coffee, and we can talk about this opportunity. I'd spent weeks preparing for this moment. I had fake documents, printed on professional letterhead, complete financial projections, and a detailed presentation about a property development project in a growing suburb about 2 hours away. It was all completely fabricated, but it looked legitimate. The project, I explained, involved buying distressed properties, renovating them, and selling them for profit. My financial advisor had identified 3 houses that could be purchased for a total of $150,000, renovated for another $50,000, and sold for $300,000 within 6 months. That's $100,000. Dollar profit split between investors, I said, sliding the fake profit projections across my small table. $50,000 each for a 6-month commitment. Clarissa studied the documents with the same intense focus she'd used when she was conning me. I could see her mental calculations, weighing the risk against her desperate need for more income. These numbers look incredible, she said slowly. But Carmen, after what happened with Phoenix, are you sure about this? I took a deep breath and played my ace card. Clarissa, I know you feel terrible about what happened before. I can see it's been eating at you. This could be a chance for both of us to move forward together, as sisters should. Her face softened slightly. The guilt card always worked on people who'd done something wrong. They wanted to believe they could make amends without actually facing consequences. But Carmen, I don't have $50,000 liquid right now. The house payments, the wedding planning. Actually, I said, as if the idea had just occurred to me, there might be another way to structure this. Since you have equity in your house, you could use that as collateral instead of cash. My advisor has worked with secured investments before. I watched her face carefully. This was the crucial moment. Would her greed overcome her caution? How would that work exactly? She asked. I pulled out another set of fake documents I'd prepared. Basically, You'd sign a collateral agreement that puts your house up as security for the investment. If the project fails, the house would transfer to cover the losses. But since this is such a sure thing, it's really just a formality. The irony was delicious. I was using almost the exact same language she'd used to manipulate me into the Phoenix investment. The same appeals to logic, the same minimization of risk, the same suggestion that the security measure was just a formality. I don't know, Carmen, putting my house at risk? Clarissa, you said yourself that the Phoenix project was a sure thing when you convinced me to invest. This is actually safer because it's local properties we can physically inspect. Plus, you're not putting up cash, just collateral that you'll get back in 6 months along with $50,000 profit. I let that sink in for a moment, then delivered the final emotional manipulation. Look, I know you want to make things right between us. I know you feel bad about how everything turned out. This could be our chance to be partners again. But this time we both win. She was wavering. I could see it in her eyes. The war between caution and greed, between guilt and opportunity. Can I think about it for a few days? She asked. Of course, but my advisor needs to know by Friday. There are other investors interested and these opportunities don't stay available long. Fake urgency. Another page from her own playbook. She left that afternoon, promising to call me by Thursday with her decision. I spent the next 3 days in a state of nervous energy, playing out every possible scenario. If she said no, I'd have to find another way to get to her. If she said yes, she called Wednesday evening. Carmen, I've been thinking about what you said, about us being partners, about making things right. My hands were shaking as I held the phone. And I want to do this. I want us to invest together. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. That's wonderful, Clarissa. I'm so glad we can do this together. The next step was getting her to town to sign the papers. I told her we needed to meet with my financial advisor in person to finalize everything. She drove down the following Saturday, dressed in her best business attire, ready to make what she thought was a smart investment. I'd spent considerable money. I didn't have to hire an actor to play my financial advisor. Marcus was a struggling actor I'd found through a local theater group, and for $300, he was willing to spend an afternoon playing the part of a successful investment consultant. We met at a rented office space in a business complex across town. I dressed it up with fake diplomas, stock photos, and professional-looking documents. Marcus, wearing a borrowed suit, looked every inch the successful financial professional. Miss Patterson, he said, shaking Clarissa's hand. Carmen has told me so much about you. I'm excited to bring you into this opportunity. For the next hour, Marcus walked us through the fake investment details with practiced confidence. He showed us photos of the properties pulled from real estate websites, construction timelines, profit projections, and market analysis. It was a masterful performance. Clarissa asked all the right questions, trying to sound sophisticated and business savvy. Marcus answered everything smoothly, occasionally deferring to technical documents that looked impressive, but said nothing meaningful. Now, regarding the collateral arrangement, Marcus said, pulling out the crucial documents. This is fairly standard for secured investments. The property serves as a guarantee, but given the low-risk nature of this project, it's really just a formality. He slid the papers across the desk. They looked official, professional letterhead, legal language, multiple signature lines. What Clarissa didn't know was that buried in the dense legal text was language that would transfer full ownership of her house to me if the investment failed. I'd paid a real lawyer to draft these documents, telling him I needed collateral agreements for a legitimate business deal. He'd created exactly what I'd asked for, papers that would legally transfer property ownership under specific conditions. I just need to review this carefully, Clarissa said, starting to read through the contract. My heart pounded as she read. The crucial clause was on page 3. disguised among standard investment language. If she read too carefully, if she asked the right questions. But she didn't. She was too focused on the profit projections, too eager to move forward with what she saw as an easy money opportunity. After 20 minutes, she looked up with a smile. "This all looks good. Where do I sign?" I watched my sister sign away her house with the same calm expression she'd probably worn when she was stealing my inheritance. The poetic justice was almost overwhelming. "Excellent," Marcus said, collecting the signed documents. "I'll file these with the appropriate offices and get the project started. You should see your first progress report within 2 weeks." After Clarissa left, I sat in that fake office for another hour, just processing what had happened. The hard part was over. Now I just had to wait for the investment to fail. Over the next month, I sent Clarissa regular updates about the project. Construction delays, permit issues, contractor problems, all the same kinds of excuses she'd given me about the Phoenix development. The difference was that my fake problems had fake solutions and fake progress reports to maintain her confidence. "These things always have hiccups," I told her during one of our calls. "But Marcus says we're still on track for completion by the end of the month." Meanwhile, I was preparing for the final phase. I'd found a real estate attorney who specialized in property transfers and foreclosures. I explained that I had a legitimate collateral agreement that needed to be enforced due to investment failure, and he agreed to handle the legal process for a flat fee. The beauty of the situation was that everything was technically legal. Clarissa had voluntarily signed a contract putting her house up as collateral. When the investment failed, which it would since it never existed, the contract would automatically transfer ownership to me. 6 weeks after she'd signed the papers, I called her with the bad news. "Clarissa, I need to tell you something. And you're not going to like it. What's wrong?" I could hear the panic creeping into her voice. The investment fell through. There were environmental issues with one of the properties that nobody caught during the initial inspection. The whole project is dead. The silence stretched for so long I thought she'd hung up. "What does that mean for us?" she finally whispered. "Well, according to the contract you signed, since the investment failed, the collateral transfers to cover the losses." "What collateral?" "I thought you said it was just a formality." "The house, Clarissa. Your house is the collateral." I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end of the line. "Carmen, you can't be serious. You can't take my house over a failed investment. I'll sue you. You'll what?" I interrupted, my voice suddenly cold. "You'll take legal action over a contract you signed voluntarily. You'll claim fraud when you did the exact same thing to me." The silence was deafening. "Besides," I continued, "I have a very good lawyer who assures me that everything was done legally. You put up your house as collateral, the investment failed, and now the house transfers according to the contract terms. It's really that simple. Carmen, please. This is my home. Harrison and we're getting married next month. You can't do this to me." The desperation in her voice might have moved me once, but I remembered my own desperation when I'd begged. I had to tell me what had really happened to my money. I remembered how she'd dismissed my pain and told me that losing my inheritance was just the reality of investing. "Clarissa, you were right when you told me that sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. This time you lost. But the house is worth way more than $50,000. This isn't fair." "Fair?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You stole my entire inheritance and bought this house with my money. Now the house is going back to where it belongs. That sounds perfectly fair to me." She started crying then, really sobbing. "Carmen, I'm sorry about what happened before. I know I made mistakes, but please don't do this. We're sisters." "We were sisters when you stole from me too, but that didn't stop you. I'll pay you back. I'll get a loan. With what collateral? Your house belongs to me now." The legal process took 3 weeks. My attorney handled everything professionally, filing the necessary paperwork and coordinating with the county offices. Clarissa hired her own lawyer, but there wasn't much he could do. She'd signed a legitimate contract. The terms were clear, and she'd received proper consideration for the agreement. Her attorney did try to argue that the contract was fraudulent since the investment was fake, but my lawyer was ready for that. We had documentation showing that Clarissa had been fully informed about the risks, that she'd voluntarily entered into the agreement, and that investment failures were an acknowledged possibility covered by the collateral clause. More importantly, we had evidence of her own fraudulent behavior in the Phoenix scheme. If she wanted to claim fraud, we were prepared to file counterclaims that would expose her theft of my inheritance. Her lawyer quickly advised her to drop that line of argument. The day the house officially transferred to me was surreal. I drove to the beautiful Spanish-style villa that had been purchased with my stolen money and used my new keys to walk through rooms that should have been mine all along. It was even more beautiful than the photos had suggested. Hardwood floors, granite, countertops, a master bedroom with a walk-in closet bigger than my entire apartment. There was a pool in the backyard, mature landscaping, and a 3-car garage that could have housed a small family. This was the life Clarissa had built with my inheritance, and now it was mine. I found her in the master bedroom, packing her belongings into cardboard boxes. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes red from crying. "I hope you're happy," she said bitterly. "I'm satisfied," I replied. "There's a difference." She stood up, facing me across the room where she'd spent the last year, sleeping peacefully while I struggled in a studio apartment. "You know what the worst part is," she said. "I actually thought you'd forgiven me. I thought we were rebuilding our relationship." "We were," I said calmly. "I was learning to forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean letting you keep what you stole. So what now? You get the house and I'm homeless. You'll figure it out. You're resourceful, remember? Resourceful enough to steal someone's entire inheritance and make them think it was a failed investment." She finished packing in silence. As she carried her boxes past me toward the door, she paused. "You've changed, Carmen. You used to be kind." "I used to be naive," I corrected. "You taught me the difference." After she left, I walked through the house again, this time as its rightful owner. I thought about our parents, about how they'd wanted their children to support and care for each other. They'd probably be heartbroken to know what we'd become. One daughter who stole and another who'd learned to steal back, but they'd also understand justice. Dad had always said that actions have consequences, and Mom had taught us that family meant protecting each other, not taking advantage. I moved into the house the following week. After a year in that cramped apartment, having space felt almost overwhelming. I set up the master bedroom with furniture I'd been storing since my divorce, turned one of the spare rooms into an office, and slowly began to make the place feel like home. The best part was that the house was completely paid off. Clarissa had used my entire inheritance as a down payment and taken out a mortgage for the rest, but the collateral agreement had transferred the property free and clear to me. I owned it outright, with no monthly payments, no debt, and no financial stress. 3 months after taking possession, I ran into Harrison at the grocery store. He looked terrible, exhausted, defeated, completely different from the confident lawyer I'd researched online. "Carmen," he said when he saw me, "I heard about what happened with Clarissa." "I'm sure you did." He shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure how to navigate the situation. She's staying with her friend Jessica right now. The wedding is off, obviously." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I actually meant it. Harrison seemed like a decent guy who'd gotten caught up in Clarissa's deception just like I had. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Was any of it real? The investment, the partnership? Was she really trying to make things right between you?" I considered the question carefully. I think she wanted to believe she was making things right, but she also wanted $50,000 profit from an investment she couldn't afford to make. People are complicated, Harrison. We can want to do the right thing and the profitable thing at the same time. He nodded slowly. She told me about what happened before, about your parents' house and the Phoenix investment. I had no idea. Most people didn't. Clarissa was very good at controlling the narrative. For what it's worth, he said, I think you did what you had to do. Family shouldn't steal from family. As I drove home to my beautiful house, my house, I reflected on how much had changed in 2 years. I'd gone from having everything to having nothing to having everything again. But more than that, I'd learned who I really was underneath the naive trust and people-pleasing tendencies. I was stronger than I'd thought, more patient, more strategic, more capable of long-term planning than I'd ever imagined. Clarissa had inadvertently taught me skills I never knew I possessed. 6 months later, I got a letter from her. She was living in another state, working as a sales manager for a small company, trying to rebuild her life from scratch. The letter was part apology, part explanation, and part plea for understanding. She wrote about how the pressure of maintaining her successful image had driven her to make increasingly desperate decisions. How she'd convinced herself that taking my inheritance was somehow justified because she deserved it more, had worked harder for it, would use it more wisely. She wrote about how losing the house had forced her to confront the person she'd become, and how she was working with a therapist to understand her behavior patterns and make better choices. She wrote that she understood why I'd done what I did, and that she probably deserved it. The letter ended with a question. Is there any chance we could ever be sisters again? I read the letter 3 times, sitting in the sunroom of my beautiful house, looking out at the pool where I now swam laps every morning. I never wrote back. Not because I was angry anymore, the anger had faded once justice was served, but because some betrayals create permanent damage, even when they're repaid in full. Some relationships can't be rebuilt, even with genuine remorse and changed behavior. Clarissa had taught me that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, that trust once broken can't always be repaired, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face the full consequences of their choices. She'd also taught me that I was capable of more than I'd ever imagined, both in terms of what I could endure and what I could accomplish when I set my mind to it. A year later, I started my own consulting business, working with small companies on marketing and business development. The house provided the perfect home office space, and having no mortgage meant I could take risks and build slowly without financial pressure. The business grew steadily, fueled by the strategic thinking skills and understanding of human psychology I developed during my year of planning revenge. I was good at reading people, at understanding their motivations, at building trust, and guiding them toward mutually beneficial decisions. Turns out the same skills that had helped me get my house back also made me an excellent consultant. 2 years after moving into the house, I was making more money than I'd ever made in my corporate job, working with clients I genuinely enjoyed helping, and living in a beautiful home that I owned outright. I'd started dating again too, a kind, honest man named David who was a teacher at the local high school. He knew the whole story of what had happened with Clarissa, and he respected both my pain and my determination to seek justice. "You're the strongest person I know," he told me one evening as we sat by the pool watching the sunset. "You lost everything and rebuilt it all, but better than before." "I had a good teacher," I said. "My sister taught me exactly what not to do, and exactly what I was capable of when pushed to the limit." The house was different now than when Clarissa had lived in it. I'd redecorated completely, replacing her modern furniture with pieces that felt warm and welcoming. I'd added bookshelves, plants, family photos from before our relationship imploded. I'd made it truly mine. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about what I did to Clarissa. The answer is no, not really. I feel sad about how our relationship ended, Sad that our parents never got to see their daughters supporting each other the way they'd hoped. But I don't feel guilty about taking back what was stolen from me. What I did was exactly what she did. I used someone's trust and greed against them to take their money. The only difference was that my money had been stolen in the first place, so I was taking back what was rightfully mine. Justice isn't always pretty, and it isn't always kind, but sometimes it's necessary. And sometimes when someone teaches you exactly how cruel and calculating they can be, the best thing you can do is learn from their example and use their own methods against them. My sister wanted to play games with people's lives and finances. She just didn't expect me to learn the rules and play better than she did. Now I'm 37, financially secure, happily in love, and living in a beautiful house that I own completely. I have a successful business, good friends, and a future full of possibilities. Clarissa, as far as I know, is still working her sales job and renting a small apartment in another state. I guess you could say we both got exactly what we deserved.